Yeah.
Morning.
Okay, so we are on Nun Bays, Umid Bays, about 6 lines from the top. So we're gonna this next Gemara, this next daf is all going to be continuations and explanations on the Mishnah, the Mishnah that we had on Nun Aleph Umid Bays. Where we were talking about the coinage and how much time you had to return it, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see now over this next, hopefully today, a continuation of that Mishnah. So we're up to Omamar. I think it's 6 lines from the top. Omamar. So the Gemara says that we said, how do you take it out? How do you take a coin out of circulation? So the Mishnah said, that in order to take the coin out of circulation, he should take it and he should puncture it and make a hole in it and use it as a necklace for his son or daughter. In other words, it's no longer a coin to be used, but it becomes useful just as a necklace. That's what the Mishnah says. Correct the Gemara of Raminu. We have the following brisa. What does the brisa say? Lo yasena mishkal be mishkalosav. That when you want to take a coin that has it basically has been run down and thinned out to the point where it's no longer really a proper coin, you should not use it as a weight. In other words, you could still say, well, like the Gemara had said, that we'll use it as a weight and count the weight. Says you shouldn't use it as a weight, says the Brisa. Below yizrakena ben gruatoiso, you shouldn't just use it as scrap. In other words, just throw it into a pile. Below yikvena v'yitlena b'tzava beno, and specifically the Brisa says you should not hang it as a necklace around your son or daughter's neck. In other words, this is still perpetuating the coin. The coin is still around, and it seems that this brisa is very adamant that you shouldn't do those things. What should you do? You should literally grind it down, melt it down, or yikos means to cut it up. In other words, you have to literally destroy it so that it has no zecher of the coin, is what that brisa says. Not to just utilize it as a coin, but not as a coin. You're going to use it as a paperweight or something else, or even as a necklace. You shouldn't do that, says the brisa. So how can our Mishnah here say that what you do is you use it as a necklace? There's a Meferish brisa that he brings down that says exactly the opposite. So the Gemara has an interesting answer. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar answers. Amar le Rav Huna, Rabbi Elazar. Some say it's Rav Huna, the name of Rabbi Elazar. Lo kasha. There's not a stira. Why? Kan be'emtza, kan min hatzad. What does that mean? If the hole that you make for the necklace is smack in the middle of the coin, that's okay, because that can never be repaired. Okay, you make a hole in the coin, and the coin becomes the necklace, and it's kind of hanging there. But min hatzad, if you somehow make the hole, in other words, a necklace can be where the hole is in the middle and you have this whole round coin sort of hanging around the neck, or you could make it at one end so that when you have the whatever it is, the silver or the string or whatever you put through the necklace to hang it, it literally hangs down as a full coin with just a hole at the very top. So you could see different necklaces have different ways of being set up. So the Gemara says that when you do it minatzad, then that you're not allowed to do. Why? Because, and we'll see Rashi will bring down in a minute, because there it's still dangerous. Someone can take a machine or whatever they had and grind down the edge of the coin so that the hole becomes not visible anymore. And it may be smaller, but it's still a coin. So in other words, there's the danger of still having that coin in circulation because you've taken the hole and made the hole disappear at the edge. You can't make a hole in the middle of the coin disappear.
Well, they changed the diameter by grinding around the
But
outside.
also, but it's no different conceptually from the diameter changing because over constant use over years that the edges got worn down. So it wouldn't therefore be immediately obvious. I think that's the
right.
problem.
That's right.
Even though this is a coin that you're turning into a necklace because it's already significantly worn down.
Right.
But still they were worried about it, I guess.
Right. But again, if it was a seller and you ground it down and it's now a shekel or even a dinar, so it's a smaller coin, but it's still a coin that can be used and somehow maybe passed off as a larger coin. So in other words, when the Brisa says not to do it, it means there shouldn't be any zecher of the coin that could be illegally used. So that's the difference in the Brisa and in the Mishnah where it says that.
So that sort of says that they didn't have any figures on the coin. They didn't have any images on the coins because if you can grind down to a shekel and it doesn't have any picture of the president of the United
States. You mean a specific image for a shekel and a specific for a dinner? Yeah. Yeah,
no, but I think they did. You look at all these ancient coins, they had images. But I think those images themselves could get rubbed down. And so if it's rubbed down, can you tell the difference between, Washington and Lincoln once it's rubbed down a bit? No.
But isn't that really far-fetched that you'd rub down all the images that you couldn't recognize what it was? I mean, we're going pretty extreme.
You know what? On the one hand, it's a problem, but on the other hand, if people are handling coins, they're probably not even very careful in looking what the picture on the coin is, number one. And number two, I mean, yeah, it would be a little bit odd to take a George Washington quarter, grind it down, and then wind out with a Thomas Jefferson quarter. I mean, that would be a little bit hard to imagine, right? Because if you're rubbing it down, it has a hole, and you want to cut the hole. All of a sudden, this quarter becomes it still has Washington's picture, but it's now the size of a penny or the size of a nickel, corresponding to whatever it was.
But it's far-fetched in a different way. So I think we're talking only about coins that the facing was erased, that the denomination and or picture was eradicated because of use. So now we're getting to why you can't use it in the middle or the side. So then you're saying, well, it's already not recognizable as its own denomination. And then you're worried about the hole being in the side, so you can shave it down so that it looks smaller than the other regular coin in use. People aren't going to recognize that. I mean, it just seems a little far-fetched.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, look, we don't exactly know how this transpired, but the fact of the matter is that and I don't know, the coins that they're finding, what are they finding? Images? Most of the coins from a couple thousand, yeah, maybe some of the Roman coins, and they have a picture of the emperor or something, but other coins, I think, were not with face, not with actual pictures, but maybe had other kind of simonim. Maybe it had, a picture of some wheat or some other identifier to show what it was. So maybe it wasn't if it were rubbed out, it wasn't as big a deal as, like for instance, our pictures that we have on coins, which are much more readily discernible, whether it's a shekel, it's a quarter, it's a dime, it's a silver dollar. So it could be that those pictures were not as well defined.
Menashe usually looks up everything. So we must have examples of the coins in the time of the Gemara, in the time of the Mishnah. And we should be able to see those coins in museums or wherever they are nowadays, and then it will answer some of these questions that we're raising.
Well, Roman era coins, which would have covered the time of the Mishnah and Israel, certainly had images. They love to put the images of the emperors on. There's no.
They do, right?
Yeah. All right. So as you were right before you said that, I was starting to look. So Here's the first thing I found, which is now these are Israeli coins, okay, but they're showing basically the very end of the second base of Mikdash, and they have some sort of inscriptions on them, they have some symbols on them, and so on. And I couldn't tell you exactly what this is. You can also see that some of them are a bit messed up around the edges.
Well, they're not even round.
They started out, I think they started out round, but again, over time,
that they wore down that much that
well, the question here is we don't know is, were these worn, because these top ones look pretty round, were they worn down because of use? Were they worn down because they were buried for thousands of years and got messed up in the rocks and this and that? Yeah, I don't know, but this gives us some idea that yes, certainly towards the end of the second base of Mikdash, they were minting coins with symbols and things on them.
Right, but it would be forbidden to use a face, because in halacha you're not supposed to.
Right. That's an ongoing debate today. But yes, therefore I would not expect an Israeli coin to have a face on it, but it can have all kinds of other symbols. You can have menorahs, you
like
can
a
have
cup.
this,
It has a cup, it has,
etc.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
But the dinar that the Chachamim in the time of the Gemara were dealing with were not Israeli or Israelite or Jewish coins in any.
No, they're probably Roman coins. Yeah, the coin of the realm.
The original of the dinar is the Roman denarius, which caught hold throughout the Middle East, and those certainly had images on. They loved images.
Right, but on the other hand, Israel, we go back to the time of Abraham, we already had a defined shekel, at least by weight, even if presumably different. Obviously, Abraham wasn't minting his own coins, but it means already there must have been some fairly standardized sizes of coins within
that we
the
use,
Middle East.
And if I could jump in for just a minute, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but since we're there anyway, the concept that all the different people back then were so careful on trying to keep an eye on the coins. If we look at nowadays, when the Susan B. Anthony dollar came out, which was a fiasco, it was a dollar coin, it was silver looking, it was virtually the same size as the quarter. They made the outside a little bit different, but it was virtually the same size as a quarter. And so many people were basically giving it or accepting it as change for a quarter, even though it clearly has Susan B. Anthony on it versus who's on the quarter? I guess George Washington.
Right, but more than it said Susan B. Anthony, it said on it that it was a dollar.
Right. It says a dollar. It said everything, and there was so much confusion that this coin was being used as a quarter versus a dollar. So I'm just saying, if that happens nowadays, when people, I think, are even more careful, back then, I'm not sure. We may be giving people too much credit by saying, well, but if the face looks a little bit different here, people are confusing a dollar coin for a quarter coin, even though different picture, different wording. So I just think human nature is that, you kind of assume everything is normal until you figure out
and mostly in commerce, people aren't going to be makbid and look careful.
Yeah.
So I think I 100% agree. I remember that whole thing with the Susan B. Anthony. One thing I point out here is this key question of what type of metal. They were all alloys, still are all alloys, but our modern U.S. and probably most other countries' coinage is no longer no longer a measurable, this is always X amount of silver kind of a thing. It's defined each year what the percentages are, but it's not considered that this is equivalent to getting an ounce of silver. And so it's almost like the paper money. Back then, I think the whole idea, you had gold, which was by far the highest value, just as it is today, silver and copper. The silver was the most common coin. We had all this stuff months ago now about the question of whether you could exchange the silver for the copper for the silver, and so on. Right. But the standard coins were silver. And so once you're within one type of metal, then it really becomes much more the size rather than the size / weight rather than what does it look like. So if you look at, for example, quarter and a nickel, quarter and a nickel's different. Quarter and a dime, the quarter is basically, if I understand, 2.5 times, has for a long time, even though they're no longer silver, it's 2.5 times the size and weight of a dime. because back when it was all silver or a high silver alloy, that's the way you would do it, and you would be able to tell the difference.
Right.
So therefore, the literally the face on it doesn't matter as much as the size, which of course gets all the stuff aware.
Yeah, yeah. So, and again, they may have just looked at coins by size, not paid attention, as the seller had a certain diameter, the shekel had a smaller diameter, a dinar had a smaller diameter, and you didn't even have to look at it. You felt it and you knew, oh, this is a dinar, this is a shekel. So they wouldn't be paying attention as much to the what was on it. Yeah. In any event, so this is the Gemara's answer. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Be'emtza yikvena," he make a hole, the mishanikva lo sagir. In other words, once he made the hole in the middle, then then no longer was that even an issue as to about using it. But minat sad lo yikvena vishaharamai, the crook, sheyimtze yokitz oisa saviv, he'll rub it down around the edges achiyotzetz haneket, until the hole disappears because it's really at the very edge. Or mirmo bo es ha'acherim, and he'll cheat the others v'yotzienu b'shekel, and he will use it as a shekel. So in other words, there we're really afraid that a Ramai will take advantage. So that's what we say. If the hole is at the edge, you can no longer use it for a weight or a necklace, but you have to really destroy it. And then again, unfortunately, we're catering to the lowest common denominator. So if there's a possibility that someone will cheat, we'll say they will cheat. So therefore, that's why that Brisa said, no, you cannot, you can't make a necklace out of it. But that's what they meant. Now, the next part of the Mishnah tells us how long you have to make a complaint or to try to get your money back. So says the Gemara on that Mishnah, Ad Mosai Mutalahat. The Mishnah said, how long do you have to return it once you realize that it is defective or that it's not worth it? But so we said in the larger cities where there were money changers as part of the commerce, then when you brought it to a money changer, you would know what it is. So in other words, we say that typically, whatever that amount of time is, engaging in time until you can show it to a money changer. Not very long, a day or two or three maybe. But kfarim, but in the small towns, ad Arvi Shabbos, until Erev Shabbos of the following week, because people don't have money changers, number one. People aren't Bikiyim, usually in the towns they're not as sophisticated. So when you went out to shop Erev Shabbos and you brought it to a storekeeper, the storekeeper would already be a maven. Apparently people didn't shop much during the week, but when it came to Erev Shabbos, you go to Machne Yehuda, you go, one of the places where it's bustling, and you bring it to a shopkeeper, and the shopkeepers have sharp eyes, because they're in the money business, so to speak, and they get a coin, they say, wait a minute, what are you giving me here? So at that point, he'll be alerted to the fact that he has a defective coin, and he'll complain. So that's what the Mishnah says, that's how you have to look at it. Bekrachim, you have until the Shulchani, and Bekfarim and Arba Shapsis. Correct, the Gemara, Mashno Besela, the Maflig, why by Sela do we make a difference between a big city and a small city as to when you have to return it? And by Talis, there's no chilik. By Talis, it's one size fits all. Either you go to the tagir, you go to a neighbor, or you go to the storekeeper. It didn't make a chilik between a big and a small city. Why by Talis not? And by money, yes. I mean, we knew there are some differences between money and merchandise, but why should it make a difference here? You have the same situation, the same setting for money as you do for talis, and we have a different halacha. That for money you have a difference, and for talis you don't have a difference. Correct the Gemara why? Says Rashi says, "Umay shno talis deloy mafli, tichtoni b'chtei sheyir l'tager or the krovo," because it's just one statement. Either you go to the tager or you go to his relative. Loshno krach, loshno kfar. There's no chilik between a big city and a small city when it comes to a talis. So that's the Gemara's kasha. Why should there be a difference? And we have a couple tariqs which go in different directions. Omar Abaya. So Abaya tries to answer here and give the answer. Ki tanan nami masnisun betalis bekrochen tanan. So Abaya says inherent in the conversation about a talis is that it refers to a city where there are money changes and all. But and so Abaye is saying that if it were a kfar, if it were a small town, then basically we're going to follow the pattern of the coins, and we're going to say you're allowed more time, for at least maybe you have a chance to show it to because again, the small towns, I guess in those times were maybe a one-horse town that had a shop and this, that, and the other, and people didn't really, they went from week to week, they shopped Erev Shabbos, and that was for the whole week, not like a town. Even towns might not have been that big, but still they were, bigger than villages. So to understand the mentality of the time, Abaye is saying, of course, there is a chilik. When we talk about, in other words, he didn't even want to spell out the chilik. He said, of course, we're talking about a krach when we're talking about a tagir and a karav. It goes without saying. But by a small village, it's the same as money. So Abaye doesn't really make a difference between money and talis. He says they're one and the same. Rava, however, does make a chilik. And he says as follows: Talis kol inish kimle begave. He says, by a talis. See, again, we've seen now over the weeks that with money, it's a very fine thing. Sometimes with money, a coin gets messed up, and the sizes of coins. Money seems to be in a whole different mentality. You have a talis, you have a garment. That's quite simplistic. You take that garment, you show it to somebody, and that person, almost everybody understands what a shirt is, what a pants is. In other words, there isn't that kind of expertise required by a talis, meaning a garment or a chayfetz, other than money. So even in a small town, you're going to find people who will know what to do with it, and they'll understand. Oh yes, this is undervalued, overvalued, or whatever it happens to be. So in other words, Rabbi is saying you're right. We don't worry about a talis between a big city and a small city because there's always someone who will understand it. But but by a coin, given the lav kol inish kimle begave elo shulchani. Again, it takes a shulchani, a money changer who deals with money 24/7. That's all he does. He just handles money. He will have an expertise that a simple person who's in a different line of business or whatever he's doing, he has the money because he gets money and he pays what he has to pay, but he's not a baki. So here, Rav is saying the bekiyas of money is something that only a money changer has. Therefore, Hilkach bekrachim dikir shulchani. That's why he makes a difference. By a big city where there's a shulchani, a Shiur l'shulchani, because you have the expert. You go to a bank. I mean, maybe some towns don't even have banks. So who's going to know anything about money? Maybe they're not giving enough credit. Maybe people do know, but for the most part, money is a chayfetz, is a medium that you have to have some degree of expertise. So therefore, you can show the shulchani, b'kfarim deleka shulchani, but in a kfar, in a small village, deleka shulchani, at Erev Shabbos, the salkim l'shuka, then it's only until the following Erev Shabbos, because that's when people go to the marketplace. Again, people don't really shop much maybe during the week, and they don't interact so much with storekeepers and others. So, but it's a bustling trade Erev Shabbos, because we know Erev Shabbos, everybody is out there wanting to covet Shabbos. So that's when someone will see the money and will say, wait a minute, what do you have here? You don't have a coin here. And then he'll know that he was cheated or purposely or not, and he'll go back to the source. And that's why the Mishnah gives him that latitude. So basically, and maybe seichel, we understand, as we've been saying, that money requires a little bit more expertise than a chayfetz, than a garment. So with a garment, we let it slide. We say that everybody will have some knowledge and will be able to say, this is a fair deal, wasn't a fair deal. With money, though, you won't have that same expertise. Okay, so Rashi says, okay, no, okay. So there's no Rashi here. So again, that's the chilik here between Abaye and Rava. Abaya basically acknowledges that there is a chilik, but it goes without saying. He said we're only really talking about large cities. Small towns, of course, you can have extra time. And Rava wants to say that the reason by a garment, even in small towns, people will have enough knowledge. He was down the Kapskos that people would know, and therefore we don't make a chilik. But by money, we do make a chilik. Okay, fine. Now the Mishnah went on to tell us something very interesting. And if the person who gave the coin recognized even a year later that coin was deficient, in other words, it was the giver of the coin, the fellow who initiated the transaction, he himself came to the conclusion that he passed a improper coin, that it was not up to par, it was defective, as it were. So then he should take it back even a year later. So this goes in the face of everything we've said before, where we both for garments and for coins we made like a siyag, we made a sort of a fence and said you can only use it. You can only be able to return it over a certain period of time. The exception is if the person who gave it himself says, "Oh, what did I do? I passed on an improper coin." Break the Gemara. So now the Gemara wants to understand what this line means, that the person who gave it was the one who sort of had charata. He acknowledged that he passed a bad coin. So okay. So here's how the Gemara goes through it. If you're talking about large cities, so the Gemara now wants to break it down and look at the landscape, or even the halacha, but the landscape. What does the Gemara say? And if it's a big city, we already established that for a big city, it's until you give it to the shulchani, and the shulchani is for the final word, and he has enough time. He's the one who can say yes, it was, no, it wasn't appropriate. If in the villages, or at Erev Shabbos, you've already said that you go until Erev Shabbos, right, till the following Shabbos. So the kasha then becomes, you've already established parameters for when, I mean, either a big city or small city, there isn't anything else. So the kasha then, it's kind of a question on the Mishnah. How does the Mishnah come about saying that we can return the item just because the giver has charata? Oh, I made a mistake. But that's inherently what the Mishnah said. When you have those kinds of mistakes, then you have a limited period of time. Otherwise, it sort of, it takes, if it's a catch or sketch can, then there isn't any seder. That's why the Mishnah made this order and said either in a big city this, in a small city this. How do you come along and say that you have a year to return it in any event? That's the general question. How does a year come into play when the Mishnah says we've established parameters for how you can return? So the answer is better than the kasha. The kasha is a general kasha, but here's the thinking. Amar Rav Chizda. So Rav Chizda came and he said, you know what? Midat Chasidus, Shanu Khan. You know what? There's always room for exceptional Hasidus. If someone is a exceptionally careful individual in his piety, so he will say, you know what? Forget about all the rules. The rules say this, the rules say that. I can't live with it because I passed on a bad coin. Now, why it would take him 12 months to realize that, I'm not exactly sure. But at the same point, in other words, it may never come back to him. But if someone came back to him, see, this is the point. He's not going out searching for anybody. He realizes he made a mistake and he said, I shouldn't have done it. Chaval, I don't know where that coin, how many times it's changed hands. Someone along the way gets this bad coin and says, let me investigate. Someone passed a bad coin, let me figure it out. And someone actually figures it out and goes back and says, oh, it was Yankel from this town who was the originator of the coin, and they go back to Yankel. This is the Chiddush, says Rav Chisda, that someone who has a Midas Chasidus, and he says, I made a mistake. Unfortunately, I can't track it. But if it comes back to me and someone tinus to me, you made a mistake, and here's a coin that you passed, then, says Rav Chisda, Midas Chasidus allows him to take it back even a year later, meaning a long period of time. I don't know if he means literally a year, but he means that you're not bound by the normal rules of villages and towns. So that's so Chisda gives an interpretation, and we've seen sometimes in the Gemara as well that the term Midas Chasidus is used as Lefnim Mishur Sadin. You don't have to do it, but if you're Lefnim Mishur Sadin, you want to be very exacting, then the halacha applies a little bit differently. Logically, no.
This is voluntary. This
Very
is
voluntary. Totally voluntary, correct. Totally voluntary, because he feels the need to repatriate, if you will, a person who may have lost money because of him, and he shouldn't be, even though it was a mistake, but there should be no even attachment or chashash that he did something improper. That's Pshat Midas Chasidus. You're very pious, you're very serious about it, and you'll say, okay. Frek the Gemara. Now, this is an interesting point. Frek the Gemara, if we're saying it's Midas Chasidus, and a person can, even 12 months later, come back and say, I'll accept it back, Ema Seifa. Let's look at this last part of that Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Ein lo olav ela tarumas. Here it is. A person, let's say he follows the chain, and he says, you know what? That coin originated with Yankel, and I'm going to go back to Yankel, and I'm going to collect the money. Halachically, he has not a leg to stand on, because the time frame passed. There is a time frame. We're saying it's Midas Chasidus, that someone says, okay, I'm a chosid, I'm Lefnim Mishur Sadin, I'll take it back. But from the finder's point of view, from the victim, in other words, the fellow who was defrauded, who allegedly he was defrauded because he got a bad coin, says the Mishnah, Ein lo olav ela tarumas. He has not a legitimate taina, give me back my money. He has only a complaint. Tarumas means he can complain. All right, so you complain. You feel better after you complain, but he has no valid, let's say, go to Bezdin, collect money type thing. Not at all. Only tarumas. So now the kasha is Laman. Who is he going to complain to? What's the tarumas? If he goes back to the chosid, the fellow who's willing to take it back, lo kablu lekablu, then lo kablu lekablu. Then why should he? In other words, the person who is the chosid doesn't have to take it back, right? So where's the complaint? If you say the complaint is with the chosid, which really is kind of doesn't make sense, then lo kabla lekabla, you shouldn't take it back. Why is there a complaint? Why is there any complaint when he takes it back, right? So below tarumas tiele, and there won't be any tarumas. In other words, if the chosid says, I'm not taking back the coin, I changed my mind, I'm not taking it back, then he's not taking it back, and the time limit passed, he has no leg to stand on, then below tarumas tiele, there can't be a complaint. How could you make a complaint? In other words, if the chosid takes it back, now you're going to complain. So let him not take it back. It's kind of like a two-edged thing. If the reason why you're complaining is because he took it back and didn't give you a compensation, then don't take it back and don't have a complaint. So it makes no sense. So Elamai, you have to say the tarumas is from the person who was originally the victim. He has the tarumas, which makes more sense. So he has the tarumas. But after the chosid took it back, what's the complaint? The chosid took it back and presumably compensated him. So if he compensated the fellow who was the victim in the first place, what complaint is there? So the Gemara is asking, what's the sefer? We don't understand. We don't understand what it means. He has tarumas. Who is the tarumas and who is it on? It can't be on the chassid because the chassid doesn't have to take it back. So Elamai, the tarumas is from the victim. What tarumas does he have if the chassid takes it back and compensates him? Then he's already made whole. He should walk away. He should be happy. So what's pshat in the sefer? In other words, the kasha is on Rav Chisda. You're introducing this concept of midas chasidus, and we don't understand what's the chasidus here. What's going on? Who's complaining to whom? So the Gemara wants to answer and say, you know what, hachikam. You know what this is what the Mishnah say. Okay, the chassid, fine. He's taking it back because he's a chassid. But someone who is not a chassid and doesn't want to take back the coin, so it doesn't go on the chassid. We thought it goes on the chassid, and we don't understand what the tarumas is. So the Gemara says no. The chassid takes it back. There's no tarumas because everybody's fine and happy. But acher, someone who is not a chassid and doesn't take it back, afa pish emekabla. So even though he doesn't take it back, even though he does not take it back, ein lo alav ela tarumas, then the victim can only have a complaint. Now, what's pshat a complaint? Well, a complaint, I mean, okay, so the complaint somehow circulates in the marketplace that such and such event happened a year ago, and then again, everybody understands that it's way beyond sort of the normal frame of time. So everybody understands, but there may be people who don't.
Complaints
wait a minute, you're making a complaint against Yankel. And so it's not a pleasant thing to have a complaint, even though there's no raglayim, there's no legs to the complaint, but someone's letting off steam, but no one wants to be the object of that.
That complaint almost seems like, and I'm not. I always get confused about all the different terms of lashon hara and avak lashon hara and all this stuff. But
right.
Some variety of lashon hara in the sense that what this guy by complaining is alleging in a way that can't be brought to Beis Din.
Right.
Because of the time, because of the nature of the thing, and so on. So it's something that's never going to get proven in court, and he knows it. Everybody knows it. So, but he's basically alleging that the person, the coin may not even the coins of how you know who gave you which coin. It's all
right.
Who you trust anyway, especially after a year.
Right.
So now what you've got is somebody basically saying, don't go to Yankel. He tries to pass off these coins that are really too small and should be out of circulation as if they're full value. That's essentially going to be, it's lashon hara. The guy basically you're trying to drive. It looks like you're trying to drive this guy out of business. Maybe you have some other reason for doing it. Maybe you just don't like the guy, and you're now trying to allege, I got these coins from him because they didn't have serial numbers on there. How do you know which coin came from who?
Right, but you make a point, but it's interesting because the Gemara says, and the Mefarshim, no one suggests it's lashon hara. In other words, it's a legitimate way of you're letting off steam, even though there's no good result here. And if he's not a
more than that, there isn't a good result. There's a bad result.
But there's a negative.
There's a negative, and that's the whole problem. And as I understand lashon hara, and again, I always get confused, even though I've learned it many times. The two different types: the telling something that's not true, and the telling something that is true. Okay, if it's something that's not true, that this guy Yankel didn't really pass him these two small coins, then that's one flavor of problem, clearly a problem. And if he did, and it's just the law doesn't force him because of the time and so on to make good on it. Fine, but now you're this other type of lashon hara where you're telling the truth, and yet it's only causing problems.
Yeah, but Menashe, somehow that doesn't give rise to lashon hara because he's laying out facts, and the problem is that the time expired. If the time hadn't expired, he would have legitimately been able to make a claim. So you have a situation.
Right. He came back the next day and said, hey, you gave me all these coins, and I weighed them, and they're no good.
Exactly right. So there is a time limit. The Chazal say if you don't do it in the time limit, you're out of luck. And if you want to let off steam, we allow you to let off steam, but there's no raglayim l'davar. There's no real successful end to this, but there's not a suggestion that you shouldn't even do it because it's Lashon Hara, because in fact, these are the Metzias, this is what happened. And again, if it comes back to Yankel, I mean, if he's pious and says, fine, I did really make a mistake, but if he's saying, listen, innocent mistake, and I'm more than willing to accept it back within the regulations that Chazal put on. So if you had come back to me, but a year later, I can't, I can't really.
Yankel could also say, I deal with 25, 50 people every day. I'm not saying you're a liar, but how do we know a year later that you got these coins from me and not from the other guy?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So this is the pshara. The compromise that was made is that you can't make a legal claim, but you can sort of let off steam, and it's not Lashon Hara. It's not something that, besmirches the person, but basically, you'll feel better because you said it, and then you'll move on. I guess that's a good point, because l'chayra maybe would seem to be something that we should quash, because it's
Why
not.
isn't it? Why isn't it Lashon Hara still?
Was that?
Why isn't it still Lashon Hara?
Why it is not?
Why isn't it still?
Why isn't it still Lashon Hara?
No matter what happens.
Well,
The fact that somebody said it, it's out in the public.
Yeah, but if he can pinpoint, again, the laws of Lashon Hara are very nuanced. But if someone can trace the coin back to Yankel and say Yankel issued this coin, no one ever paid attention, it fell through the cracks, we missed the timeline. But you know what? I want, we do trace the lines back, and I, I'd like compensation. Again, there's a certain seder. I mean, the Gemara is telling us that there was an order to the world and it wasn't Hefker, and that's why Rav Chisda came with this chiddush of Midas Chasidus. But Midas Chasidus may only be, 2%, 3% of the population who prava Midas Chasidus. So you can't base a whole economy and a whole system of monetary transactions. Again, Chazal was very practical. They wanted there to be commerce and people to trust each other, and there shouldn't be and therefore therefore there should be lending without ribbis. In other words, things should go on with a very determined sort of state. So every once in a while something pops up which is somewhat improper, and we account for it. We have Onah, we have even the different shitas of Onah, but there should be some regulation that shouldn't be Hefker. This is a situation where they established, again, I bring it to statute of limitations, to our time. There's a statute of limitations. What does that mean? We give you ample time to be able to recover or to go through the motions, even in a criminal matter, other than maybe murder or something. But there are statutes of limitations so that there should be life should be orderly. It shouldn't be, oh, I remember now 7 years ago this happened, I'm going to come back and now I'm going to make a claim. That would upset the whole economy for one person who, for better or for worse, should have known better. He should have known that he had a week or 10 days or 2 weeks. But he said, you know what, forget about it. Or accidental, he didn't realize it was in his pocket. All of a sudden he sees that he's been defrauded. It's a balancing test is what it is. That do we disrupt the order of things because one person was wrong? Now, maybe if it would have been an avalanche of complaints, maybe Chazal would have looked at it differently, but apparently it didn't happen that way, that there was a certain orderly conduct, and every once in a while, something slipped through the cracks. The Gemara is telling us if it slips through the cracks, here's how you deal with it. Comes along Rav Chisda and says, right, but Midas Chasidus allows, always Midas Chasidus allows. Anytime you're very pious or you're a man of means and you say, you know what, I don't have to, but I'm going to compensate you simply because. Okay, that's fine. But for most people who live day to day, hand to mouth, they can't afford to do that. Someone comes and complains, oh, you cheated me a year ago, and he's way beyond that. He's scratching for a living, and all of a sudden he's going to be achroi to make a reimbursement. It'll upset the system. So the Gemara gives us a fine line of how you should think about this, that if you are a normal, ordinary person, again, you could always come back and say, I'll compensate you 50%, 20%, 30%. But in the whole, to keep commerce in a Seder, we say that that's not an appropriate thing to do. And again, it's not different in our time. We also have these statute of limitations for the purpose of keeping a balance and an order. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Im chosid, come, yesh lo terumas ala machzir. There are terumas, complaints ala machzir, mi kofu lekabel. What's the terumas? Who forced you to take it back? She yisarim. Tov lo shelo yekablenu, mishe kablenu. It's better that he doesn't take it back than takes it back. V'yotzi dibo al chaveiro. And again, to your point, Menashe, it's not lashon hara, but v'yotzi dibo. He will make a statement on his friend. It doesn't say lashon hara. It says dibo is kind of like a negative connotation. He'll say something not nice, right? It's not quite motzi shemra, but it's v'yotzi dibo al chavero. So, but again, it doesn't rise to anything improper, except that there'll be a sort of noise that'll swirl around him. Oh, this event happened. No one's going to accuse him specifically of cheating, but there will be sort of an aura, if you will, a little bit of
but what inevitably would happen is that, everybody hears everything going on the marketplace and so on. So now, every time Yankel tries to buy something, we're going to pull out the scale. We're going to measure your coins.
Right.
It's a little embarrassing when they do it for him and they don't do it for anybody else.
Right. But that may not be improper. It's kind of like a stigma, but it doesn't, and maybe after a while the stigma will sort of go away. But you're right. People may take a double take.
Well, I guess a modern day equivalent is there are some stores where some of them I've seen even with 20s, but certainly very, very common for anything above a 20, that they'll pull out the ultraviolet, whatever marking pen to check each bill, because that way you can make sure it's legit. And some places
they'll do that for everybody. Though.
Right. So some places they do that for everyone. The cashiers know you better do it for everybody. Otherwise the manager's going to surprise you one day and you're going to get in trouble. Other places, they may say, oh, you know what? Oh, yeah, I know you, and I'm not going to bother to do it. And it's only they see somebody they don't know, somebody they heard something about, etc.
Or they profile and say...
Profile, however you define it. Yes.
Right.
And so that would be a situation here. Oh, Yanko, yeah, I heard he was trying to play some funny business. I better double check his stuff.
And maybe that's what tarumas leads to, but again, we can't pinpoint and say that there's a dava osa here, that you did something that was really against the Torah or against the Chachamim or anything else. But again, in the marketplace, you want to keep things as normal and as regular as you can. And once in a while, when there's an anomaly, we deal with the anomaly, and we'll deal with that particular situation when it arises. And hopefully, it'll be far and few between. But eventually, things do come to the surface, and we have to deal with them. Okay, what happens if he's not a chassid and he doesn't want to accept it back? You have all you can do is complain. He's not obligated to do it, right? Here, look how Rashi puts it. He caused his own hefsid. He caused his own damage. In other words, the fault lies not with Yankel, but with the victim, because he had an opportunity to return it, and just because he missed the opportunity doesn't mean that Yankel has to reimburse him. That's why Chazal gave this opportunity for tarumas, because you make the complaint and then you move on with life. Otherwise, he might harbor a grudge for a long time. But once you lift the burden and you make a complaint, for most people, maybe that's enough. Oh, I got it off my chest, and that's it. And maybe once in a while someone carries it further, but he's saying that's not the norm. So therefore, we shouldn't worry about it. Okay, so now, okay, so let's go weiter here. So we were holding. Okay. Now, the last part of the Mishnah, and this will be a big turning point for us in our learning. The last part of the Mishnah says, "V'nosel l'masa sheni ve'ena choishesh she'ena ela nefesh ro." Now here, this is very interesting. What is Masa Sheni? Masa Sheni is, it's a sort of, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, it's self-imposed. Okay, you have to eat it, but here are the rules of how you have to eat it. It's not Kohen. Again, something that's given to the Kohen and the Levi has a whole different parsha to it, because now you're obligated to make sure that you give it to the Kohen and the Levi. But what happens when you yourself are a chroy to eat it, but you have to eat it in Yerushalayim? So you have something called Masa Sheni, where you redeem it. And once you redeem it, then you can travel. Let's say you lived in Haifa or wherever else, far away from Yerushalayim. It took a couple of days to go. The food would spoil. So you redeem it and you go to Yerushalayim and you buy substitute food. Okay, that's Masa Sheni. So what is this Mishnah telling us? The Nosta Masa Sheni, you can use this coin to redeem Masa Sheni, ve'ena choshesh, and when we don't worry that it's not full value. Because what's going to happen here? You're going to take Masa Sheni and you're going to put it on a coin that isn't what you think it is. You're going to get a seller's worth, but it's not going to be a seller. Or you do it for a seller, right? And then you, as the Gemara will tell us, you go to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, the money changes are, let's see, even much sharper than in Chutz Yerushalayim. And they're going to say, wait a minute, I'm not giving you food for a seller. This isn't a seller. It's a shekel or whatever. Who's going to get cheated here? Masa Sheni is going to get cheated. Because that same Masa Sheni that you, let's say, for argument's sake, it was 5 pounds worth of fruit that you got a seller for. Now that seller was a questionable seller. Now you're going to go to Shalim and you want to buy 5 pounds of fruit for that coin. And the money changer is going to say to you, wait a minute, I'm not giving you 5 pounds for that. I'll give you 3 pounds for that, because this isn't really a seller. It's a shekel or a shekel and a half. So who got cheated? You cheated yourself, but you cheated Masa Sheni. It's your own food, but now you want to do the mitzvah Masa Sheni, and you're only going to be able to consume 3 pounds instead of 5 pounds. That's the scenario of what happens here. So now the Gemara is saying, you're allowed to do it. She'ein el nefesh ra. Only someone who is a nefesh ra, he's miserly, or he's not of the right disposition, he will refuse to take it. Anybody else would take it. You come and say, oh, I have this Masa Sheni. Sure, I'll take it. No question about it. So the Gemara is telling us that with Masa Sheni, we're more lenient to allow for let's call it a deficient coin, because it's not quite up to par, because it's l'shem mitzvah, and l'shem mitzvah, a person is not going to be as makbid as he would be in regular commerce. That's what the Mishnah is telling us here. Masa Sheni is different from all the other things that we talked about.
Why would he be less accurate from Masa Sheni? I misunderstood what you said.
In other words, when you take, okay,
I think it's that the shopkeepers in Yerushalayim would, in a sense, have Rahmanis and say, oh, because I know you're bringing this for a mitzvah, I'm going to sort of look the other way. I'm not going to be as particular about whether the coin is exact, knowing, oh, you just grabbed whatever coins you had to make the exchange, and now you're using them here. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that, for the mitzvah, that you really meant it, and so on.
But that's the antithesis of what you would think. I mean, they're used to dealing with people who are coming in to purchase Maser Sheni to eat. So
all the time
they're going to be more exacting. They're not going to just say, I'm going to sacrifice myself because I have to turn the coins around and I'm not going to get that. So I don't understand how they would be, let's say, a matador, laying, the money coming in. It just doesn't make sense.
So let me give it doesn't make. I agree, and it also doesn't make sense as follows. Yankel again. It's all on Yankel. He knows he already got this, he may have already gotten this coin with an understanding when somebody bought something from him that, oh, this is only a partial coin, when it's only gonna be worth 3/4, and he agreed, yeah, it's worth 3/4 of the amount, and everybody's happy. So he's treating it as a 75-cent shekel, 3/4, whatever. He's treating it as a shekel instead of a seller, whatever it is. So, and now he turns around, and in a sense, he's cheating himself because he's exchanging. But what he's really doing is effectively transferring, because it's all his own money. He's effectively putting less than a tenth of his produce into an exchange that becomes then exchanged for food in Yerushalayim. He's cheating the mitzvah himself.
That activity took place in the village.
Yes, but it's his own coin and his own produce. No, he's buying off, he's redeeming his own produce.
When he sold the food in Baltimore village.
No, he didn't sell the food. He had 10 bushels of fruit.
But he exchanged it for money.
He had 10 bushels of fruit, and each bushel should be worth a full-size coin.
Right.
And he says, okay, the mitzvah is that I have to take 1 bushel to Yerushalayim. I don't want to schlep to Yerushalayim, so I can exchange this bushel, or I can take a coin out of my pocket, exchange it for this bushel, and now what that means is that I now take this coin to Yerushalayim to buy a replacement bushel of food.
But the coin is not right.
If the coin's not right, what he's really doing is buying a half a bushel worth of food. He's exchanging really what should be worth a half a bushel food for a full bushel, which means he's
selling it for less than what it was worth.
Exactly.
This was a bonanza time for the shopkeepers of Yerushalayim, because most of the people did this at the time of Shalosh Regalim. They were making so much money at the time that not only for their good heart, it was l'shem mitzvah, they were making so much money they could afford to be generous. Maybe
that would support the Gemara, but I'm saying the opposite is that what the guy's doing though is if they actually turn around and weigh the coin and say, oh no, this is really only worth half as much. So what this guy is effectively, he's done it to himself. He's now only given 5% instead of 10%.
Look at it the other way. This guy's going up to purchase Maser Sheni. He wants to maximize the mitzvah. He wants to make sure that when he gets the coin, that he gets full value so that he can get everything he needs, and so he can purchase the maximum that he's allowed in Yerushalayim. Why would he lowball that? In other words, he's going to be medakdek because this is an essential mitzvah for him going up. And he's not going to, he's going to be vigilant all the way to the shopkeeper in Yerushalayim and want full value for that. It's a mitzvah. So I don't understand why he would.
If the guy's doing that and treating the mitzvah properly, there's not going to be a problem.
Exactly.
But the problem is going to be the other guy who says, you know what? I'm going to be spending a total of 3 weeks over the year in Yerushalayim. I don't want to take 10% of my stuff, which would be 5 weeks worth of food, and have to use it all within 3 weeks. I want to keep more of it for myself. Now that's the wrong attitude, but the point is that this would be sort of a loophole. And the question is, should the shopkeepers in Yerushalayim go along with it or not, in a sense?
So this is a fascinating discussion, and there's 2 ways of looking at this, because Menashe, the example that you gave was where the fellow who has the Maser Sheni is taking a coin out of his own pocket and deconstructing or being mechalel the Maser Sheni and then going to Yerushalayim. What happens if he doesn't do it that way? He sells it on the open market in Haifa or wherever, and now he has to take payment, and the payment that he takes is with a coin that is less than the full value of the coin. Now this becomes very important. I want to emphasize, because later the Gemara is going to have a very detailed discussion about this. So what is he doing? Ruvain is saying, you know what? I have this 5 pounds of fruit, which I have to sell, and I'm going to sell it to Shimon, here in Haifa, and Shimon's going to give me this watered down sella, as it were, and I'm going to accept it. I'm going to accept this watered down sella, which doesn't really, in the normal sense, buy 5 pounds of fruit. And with this sella, I'm going to go up to Yerushalayim.
Okay.
Now, when he go to Yerushalayim and he goes to the money changers or the people who are handling, and you're right, David, it's oila regel, it's chaotic, and he goes to the fellow, and the fellow says to him, "What are you giving me? You want 5 pounds of fruit for this? I'm not giving you 5 pounds of fruit. I'm going to give you 4 pounds of fruit, 3 pounds of fruit for this. That's all it is." So he looks around, he maybe tests the market, and nobody is giving him 5 pounds of fruit. So all he can do is sell it to one of the fellows there, and he gets 3 pounds of fruit. So what's happened here? Basically, Masa Sheni has been cheated, as it were. Masa Sheni means Reuven, because Reuven is the owner of Masa Sheni. And all he can do is the mitzvah that he thought he would do with 5 pounds, he can now only do with 3 pounds. For whatever that's worth, that's all he can do.
Okay, so here's the question I have.
Yeah.
And this is the key to this, which is in the scenario, my understanding, and I could be totally wrong, okay, is that if I'm the farmer, if I want to redeem my Meiser Sheni so that then I can take money to Yerushalayim instead of taking produce to Yerushalayim, I'm taking it from my own pocket and exchanging it and saying, this money is in play, just like not exactly like, but like when you do a pidyon ben, this money is in place of this boy. So this money is in place of this produce. What you just said, I think, is I don't have to do it my own redemption. I can literally sell it to somebody else and then take that money as the Meiser Sheni money. But I don't think you can do that. I thought what you have to do is redeem it. And then once you've redeemed it, now you can eat it locally. You could sell it. You could do whatever you want. So the question is, could that redemption and sale be one step? In which case your scenario works perfectly, that it becomes on the people of Yerushalayim to accept it, because otherwise the guy's getting cheated out of his mitzvah. Or are those really two separate steps, in which case the guy's doing it to himself?
You can't eat it locally. You can't eat it locally.
No, you can't eat it locally in any
Once
event.
it's redeemed, you eat it. You can eat it locally. The question is,
No, the food.
Oh, you
Once
can't.
it's redeemed, the food is no longer have any kedusha.
correct. So you could eat it
Right.
locally, or you could sell it, or
Or you
whatever.
could sell it to someone else, right? But remember that we're missing one piece here, which will only come later. Is when you redeem it, there is a fee for redeeming. There's a chomesh. There is 20% of the value of the food has to be added to the Masa Sheni. So it's not just simply.
I thought the Meiser Sheni. That's. I didn't
Masa
know that part.
Sheni is what you sell for. Let's call it a seller. But on top of that, in order to facilitate the redemption, you, the owner, has to take out of your pocket another chomesh, another 20% on top of the Masa Sheni. So when you're going to Yerushalayim, you are really redeeming not just the seller, but the seller plus 20%, because that's what's required. Now, let's say you're a farmer and you have this excess food and you have to do Masa Sheni, and you don't have the money yourself to be able to redeem it. You are allowed to redeem it through somebody else, because what you're doing is that same money is being consecrated to go to Yerushalayim. So maybe lechatchila you could say, yes, I'm going to use my own money. I'm going to redeem it. I'll add a chomesh, and then now this food I can eat it. I can give it to my neighbor. I can give it to my friends. It's regular food. I can make a party before I leave and use that food, no problem. But what happens if he's not able to redeem it on his own? Is he stuck? No, he's not stuck, because he can sell it to someone else who will then give him that seller coin, which is less than really a seller because it's rubbed out. And he can take that seller coin and a chomesh, his own chomesh, meaning he has to, in fact, dig it. Maybe he has enough for a chomesh, but not enough for the whole seller. So he sells it to someone for the seller, and then he takes a chomesh, adds on, and then he goes to Yerushalayim and he redeems it. The problem will be when he gets to Yerushalayim, that seller will not be accepted by the money changer at full value. That's where the real problem will come in. So now he has to sell it for the best value. Best value may be £3, £4 instead of 5. And he will have cheated Masa Sheni, meaning himself. But since the Kedusha is to redeem it and to use it to celebrate, he'll just have to celebrate with £4 instead of 5 because of that seller. Now, why does that become important? We're going to see next week, Mr. Shem, we're going to see that there's a big problem. There's potentially a very big problem with redeeming it with a coin that isn't worth the amount of the Masa Sheni. That poses a very big problem. We're going to see that next week when we talk about it. But in any event, for our purposes right now, that redemption, in other words, don't be so makbid that it has to be a real seller or a seller worth full value, accept it even if it's even less than a seller. As long as you're able to, make more or less, maybe less than more of the value of the food, don't have a nefesh raw, and go ahead and take it. So let's just finish based on that. Just based on that, Omer Rav Papa says, Rav Papa Shema Mina, because of what we just said that you shouldn't have nefesh raw. Hai man de moki mazuze. Okay, someone who, this is a little bit different. Someone who moke mazuz is someone who takes not a deficient coin, but a defective coin. There's a chilik between a deficient coin means you have an existing coin that's rubbed down and has lower value. This is a defective coin. What is a defective coin? Says Rashi, you find a pagam. Let's say the coin has a crack in it. Okay, for some reason it's a crack, it's not all the way through, and because of the crack, it's not valued at the full face value of the coin. Coin could be worth $1, and because it has a crack, it's worth 80 cents, as an example. That Haiman de Mukamazuze, Mikra Nefesh Raw. That's Rav Papa's inference from this Gemara, is that someone who doesn't want to take a defective coin, he is called a nefesh raw. Why? Because again, the same thing we've said. Chazal doesn't want to upset the apple cart of commerce. Therefore, this was very, very important. We see that all the time. Therefore, if we wanted we want this money to circulate in the same way as all money, right? Even though someone might say, "Oh, I'm a little bit of a makbid here, and I don't want a coin that looks this way." I mean, again, I just changed money at the bank last week, and the teller was, I asked for a couple $100, and he was taking his time. One he gave me, one he threw out. One he gave me, one he threw out. I said to the teller, don't worry about it. Give me the bills, even if they don't look 100%. I'm okay. We're taking a bill that looks a little squash. But he was makbid. He wanted to give me only the purest. Sometimes the purest bills are hard to deal with because they're brand new. They're too smooth. So I said, don't worry about it. But that's pshat here. If you have now this was a paper money, but if you have a coin that somehow looks a little bit funny, then I don't want that coin. Give me a different coin. I mean, I don't do that, and maybe most of us don't, but some people are very, very makbid. So if a papa gives us a chiddush, that when it comes, forget about deficient, forget about if it's rubbed out. If you have a defective coin, that's his chiddush. If you have a defective coin, a mukem azuzeh, and you don't accept it, then you're a nefesh ra. When are you a nefesh ra? V'hana mili hu desagelahu, when it's still accepted. But there'll be if no one would accept a defective coin, meaning everybody rejects it, that's a different story. Then you have to throw it out of circulation because it becomes something, a stigma on the coin. But if some people will, some people won't. Rav Papa's chiddush is, don't be a nefesh ra and make a big fuss about it because it'll still be used. That's an important point here, because next week the Gemara says Messiah and Chizkiah, that this is a proof to Chizkiah. That brings us into a whole new parsha that we're going to discuss next week. But for our purposes, we see whether it's a deficient coin or a defective coin, that Nefesh Ra, we have to deal with Nefesh Ra, but Nefesh Ra shouldn't be something that becomes, an overwhelming part of our dealings, because it's just not proper. Okay, fine. It's not. There are people who are, we have an expression. When a person is very makbid, we say he's very yekish. Why? Because the German Jews, had extreme hakpada, very particular about many things which other people didn't. That's just maybe a quirk of where they are. So when it comes to maybe monetary things, maybe some people would have that quirk. And we see that the Gemara tells us that in Yerushalayim, when it came to the money changers, maybe because they could, they were much more makbid than the money changers in Chutz Yerushalayim. What a money changer in Chutz Yerushalayim would accept, they won't accept. And this becomes very important next week when we talk, is because, I'll give you an example. You could do everything right, and you can get 5 pounds of fruit for the money that you exchange. And when you come to Yerushalayim, he's only going to give, he says, no, I'm only giving you 4 pounds. In other words, these people, the money changer in Yerushalayim, seem to have different rules that they were working by. That seems to be the pattern that the Gemara tells us, is that they dealt with a sort of a different hakpada, and that gives rise to problems. A lot of problems is when people make an exchange from Chutz Yerushalayim to Yerushalayim, it became very problematic, and we'll see why next week. But in any event, that's the reality, and because of that, we have to have a great hakpada, but at the same time, don't go overboard in being makbid too much. That's called nefesh ra. All right, so Mitchell, we'll stop here, and next week we'll pick up, and we'll see a very interesting transition in the Gemara next week when we learn about Chizkiah and all of his different sayings, and and how our Gemara reconciles with him. So Mitzvah next week we'll pick up.